Welcome to the Innovation Brief podcast by Meta, the podcast where we have real conversations with leaders driving meaningful change across diverse sectors, organizations, and geographies. I'm Gabriella Hernandez. In each episode, we bring you insights from innovators across the globe who are shaping the future through bold ideas, fresh perspectives, and transformative work. Today, we are excited to be joined by Sébastien Célestine, a leading Caribbean entrepreneur and investor who spent 2 decades helping to build the region's innovation ecosystem. His journey began back in 2004 when he launched his first startup, before later co-founding ALL MOL Technology, one of Guadeloupe's pioneering tech companies. Today, he's the chairman and co-founder of Entrepreneurs of Greatness, a venture studio driving inclusive entrepreneurship and sustainable growth across the Greater Caribbean and West Africa. He also serves as the Caribbean ambassador for Seedstars. Sébastien, thank you so much for joining us and welcome.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here with you.
Yeah, no, it's really excited to have you for this episode. So maybe just to kick things off, can you tell us a little bit more about how you got into this kind of work in the innovation space to begin with? What drew you to this work?
Yeah, sure. I've been, like a lot of, I think, the innovators in the state, part of it is mostly solving problems, issues that we're facing. And, the Caribbean is, and islands, I would say, is our specific geography spaces with a lot of challenges that people might not see every day. So we are a lot trying to solve them, to fix them. And on top of that, I've been on my specific journey, been raised by engineers. So from my, I would say, education and the way I've been raised in that, finding innovative solutions to problems that I could encounter. And so that's what I think led me there. My mother was the chairman of the National Institute of Research in Agri-Business and Environment in the French Caribbean. So I've been raised seeing these laboratories and facilities and all that. And so that's what drove me in that sector and still drive me in what I'm doing every day, I would say, find solutions to challenges, issues that people are facing, and that I can, with other people, help on.
That's awesome. And as we kind of touched on, you've had so many different roles, and I know you do quite a bit of work. What does a day in the life look like for you?
I think today in the space I'm in and the fact that, the Caribbean and even other spaces are really fragmented. So a lot of my days are online meetings and do the real work in between. But mostly online meetings with innovators, with institutions. We're working a lot with partners like the Inter-American Development Bank, people like the EU, other partners in the US and Africa, etc. And so my part of the work is mostly strengthening the ecosystem of partners, of implementers, of market access partners that we have and that we're building for the portfolio of companies. And right now, we've just launched maybe we'll talk about that later, but we've just launched the acceleration phase of our venture studio. And so we are deeply involved in the communication part, reaching out to people, recruitment, I would say, which is a little bit different than the phase before, where we're mostly building another part of our network, which is more on the experts, on the innovators, etc.
Amazing. Yeah, no, we'll definitely dive more into that new project because it's really cool what you've just launched. One of the questions that we like to, ask our guests is, because, innovation is a word that many people use. It's very popular nowadays. Love to ask our guests, what does innovation mean to you? And maybe what isn't innovation to you?
I have, I think, a broad definition of innovation for me is every new ways for a specific market, because it might be already existing in other part of the world, but every new ways in a specific market to solve, to address an issue or to materialize, I would say, catalyze an opportunity that have been there already and that no one was really, how can I say that? No one was really, I would not say addressing, because often you have people trying, to solve issues, etc. But the part is in the important part missing often is in the execution. And so finding the way to implement, to execute a solution that could be at small scale or at really global scale. For me, all these small things that getting bigger at time are innovations. Again, in the broad definition that I have, a lot of things are innovation. What I would say are not innovation is when you're trying to, because we see that often in our markets, you're trying to explain that something is new in that specific market through communication, etc. And then in reality, it is not. And we're seeing a lot of that, which is marketing for me more than marketing, communication more than innovation. And a little bit in the same way, you have some kind of greenwashing, climate washing, and all this kind of thing. You have a lot of innovation washing, and people trying to explain that they're doing new things while actually it is not, or it's not serving the people in the community they belong to. So I will not have a specific example, but for me, the difference is in the value that you create or not. And if you're just building to build, or if you're just saying, I'm doing stuff that are new and in fact, they are not, then for me, it's not really innovation, while once it's not really getting to create value in the market for the people in this market.
Oh, that's very true. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term, but we often say it in our work as innovation theatre a lot of the times. That's how you could see it. You know, one of the ways that you describe Entrepreneurs of Greatness, your organization, is as the region's kind of first community wealth building venture studio. What does that really mean to you in practice?
In practice is what I think is important in that we even say in our community-based venture building firm or community wealth building venture studio, we use both depending of what specifically you want to say. On the community wealth building venture studio part, I think today one of the big topics that countries, territories like ours are facing is that they're still in much extractive economies, extractive organizations from the local resources, even from the local people. When you're looking at the brain drain that we have with all the young people that are still living to have opportunities outside of our borders and are not really coming back. For us, this community wealth building venture studio is really how we're bringing innovations, how we're building innovations that might not be deep tech or whatever, because a lot of what we need to do is not really deep tech in reality, is being able to tailor innovations for the day to day, of ordinary people, I would say, without this being disrespectful or whatever, but for everyday life. And this community wealth building venture studio, the idea is really to source these innovations, to help people co-build, co-fund what is necessary. So we're building that generational wealth, and we're kind of out of this extractive cycle. And what is interesting for us and why we're saying, not just in the region, because from our research, we're kind of the first one really with that specific positioning. When you're looking, for example, at the US state like, I don't know, Mississippi or even Iowa, etc., it's states where people are still, in the same way as an island like Barbados, for example, is importing close to 80-90% of what people eat. When you look at different parts of the US, for example, or Europe, you will see the same statistics. Even with states that are big producers, for example, in agriculture, it is still organized in a way where the value that is created is not done for the community. So it's extractive. And the generational wealth that could have come from these resources, these local talents, these initiatives that are done locally is not staying in that communities. And so for us, what we're building, it's a new way to organize, I would say, economic system around and from that community, these communities, where the people building are the one benefiting from the upside of all that, and then being able to reinvest in what they need and not in what someone else needs from what they have.
No, that's great. And I think that leads pretty well into the next question, because I remember when we first ever met, and one of the things that kind of stood out to me was you were talking about this kind of greater Caribbean region and the cooperation with, Western Africa and so on. And it was a very different way how you spoke about it. It was very different from oftentimes we kind of talk about that regional or inter-regional kind of connections. You spent the last few years building a portfolio across, local commerce, agri-tech, I know is something that's a lot of interest to you, and finance, across these regions. What's the kind of thread that's connecting those sectors and regions for you, and why are they of such a big interest to you?
Yeah, I think for me, these regions, on top of the obvious shared history for a few centuries and potentially before, from what we cannot read, if I can say so, we see first for us, mostly in the agri part and what we're doing in the first vertical on innovation, business to business innovation in agribusiness value chains around the Greater Caribbean and West Africa, is that first we're sharing climate. We're sharing the same kind of crops, the same kind of culture too, that have been, I would say, influenced a lot by the African cultures from the people that have been brought in the regions in the Caribbean from West Africa, etc. And it's a bit similar for agriculture because a lot of things that came from Africa to the Caribbean, to North America, etc. at the time of the sugar economy, cotton economy, cocoa, and all these things. Then the part around the slave trade, etc. And so for us, what we see with EOG is that these economies are still organized, even if we're saying that it's like post-colonial time, are still organized in kind of the same way, still pretty extractive, raw resources coming out of them, and then imports of end products that could be sometimes products from their same resources that have went out. When you see, for example, it's not something that we're working on, but when you see that it's only now that you have some oil refineries in West Africa, while most of the crude, not most, but a lot of the crude is coming out of there and then coming back so people can use it in their car, it's for me kind of obvious nonsense. And so on agriculture, we have the same stories about every kind of crops that we have that then we just buy back, we processed or whatever. And the story for me is that the solutions that are good or that can create value in Trinidad or in Jamaica or in Guadeloupe are kind of the same that can create value in Ghana, in Senegal, or in Mississippi, or in Louisiana, or in Florida, and create value for the local people. So that's why we're putting them together. And at the same time, they have each one of them different value proposition. For us, the Caribbean in size is a small market, but it's a great laboratory because you have different kind of administrative configuration. For example, Guadeloupe, where I'm from, is still part of France and Europe. So we have these connections with France, Europe, and other parts of the world. Other countries are independent, like Barbados, Jamaica, different relationships, different communities around the world that could be in North America, in Africa, in Europe, in Asia, etc. And what we're seeing mostly is that the Caribbean for us is a great laboratory to test at small scale what can be then duplicated at bigger scale, for example, in West Africa, where you have 100 millions of people, close to 500 million, where in the Caribbean, if you do not include like the coastal countries like Mexico, etc., we have 40 million people, which is like 10 times less. So for us, the Caribbean is a lab. West Africa is a way to have scale in the same kind of solutions. And the US, Canada, etc., for us is a way to get to potentially more mature market where there is capital available, different kind of connections, different kind of scale too. It's a big market, the US, for example, with the 300 million people. And we're connecting them so each specific value proposition that each of the territories have can be an advantage, can be a source of growth, of source of strategic advantage, value proposition for all the portfolio that we're building.
You kind of mentioned this. So, like, you've worked across different types of ecosystems. So, from Europe, the Caribbean, Africa, America, as you've mentioned just now as well. What is one of the key lessons you kind of learned about innovation and so on, and the work that you do, having worked across these different environments, and how has it shaped your work going forward?
I think one thing mostly different in our ecosystems is that the innovation itself is not really it's true for other ecosystems, but for us, I think it's even more important. The innovation itself is only a part of the solution of what we need to do, etc. And we're seeing more and more that what is around innovation, the execution, the partners, the distributions, are we able to secure all that is even more important than have the best solution. It has always been true, but I think in our markets that are really specific, that are really, I would say, controlled by the way the economies are organized, with big players that are often monopolistic or oligopolistic in the market. If you want to be able to have a part of the pie, you need to be really strategic, which might not be the case in the US, for example. If you have a good product and you're able to reach people in different parts of the country, it might be already enough for you to have a great company and succeed. So we're seeing more fragmentation, more difficulties to structure. But at the same time, when we are finding solutions to that, the value proposition that we have to offer is often way stronger than what competitors are doing in bigger markets. And so then we can scale in an easier way with the right partner. But we again getting to the same analysis of who are the partners, what are they doing, and what kind of alignment we can find with them. So to finalize on that part, for me, it's really building. And so that's why we're doing what we're doing at EOG. We're building the infrastructure around the innovators so they don't have each one of them to rebuild it from scratch, because the biggest challenge is not building the innovation in our market, it's building the ecosystem around the innovation. And so that's what we're seeing, and so why we've built what we've built with EOG.
No, most definitely. I know you kind of mentioned, there are some other issues as well that are sometimes structural, right, that the region faces. I know one of the really great initiatives that you've been co-implementing recently is the Carib Equity Early Stage Investors Toolkit and Training, which is part of that larger Carib Equity Facility implemented by the IDB Lab and co-funded by EU and OECPS. Can you talk to us a little bit about Carib Equity and its role in the Caribbean innovation ecosystem?
So Carib Equity is an initiative that, had been designed and co-funded, as you said, by IDB. So the IDB Lab, the Inter-American Development Bank, the lab part of IDB, the European Union, and the Organization of African, Caribbean, Pacific States. And so you have different pillars in that. The first one was about assessing the state, I would say, of the ecosystem in the Caribbean. And so on that part, they did a study to see at what stage were the different countries, the quantities of startups, of investors, etc., that they could find in the market. After that part, what they've done is that they've worked mostly on how to support ESOs. And so there are different programs to support ESOs in the region. One with direct support, the other one with what they call Connecta Caribbean, with Bridge for Billion, where they're supporting through capacity building, platform, etc. I think 30 ESOs in the region. And latest part, not the latest because there's another one after, but another part is to support early stage investors. And so that's what we're doing with Seedstars. So with capacity building, with events, online networking series, so we can build a network of investors, which is important. And the latest part is a training. And so we have 2 cohorts of investors right now in the program till the end of the year, where every week they have course sessions plus office hours on top of these sessions where they have the opportunity to exchange with peers and progress on that. And there is a community building part too at the Carib equity level, where same thing, you're doing events to do kind of capacity building at the whole region level, whether investors, ESOs, entrepreneurs, etc. So early stage can develop more, and the innovators that have always been there, but that might not find the right path to execute, deploy, find partners, etc., have a space, a place where they can, in an easier way, build their network, their capacity, etc.
No, it's a really cool initiative, and to anyone who's listening, definitely recommend checking it out. It's Carib Equity, and we'll include links as well. And, you definitely, I think the work that you do and the people that you work with are taking this kind of like more holistic approach to the ecosystem. And as you touched on earlier, your team at Entrepreneurs of Greatness have recently launched your own accelerator program and community initiative Building the Caribbean. Can you tell us a little bit about these two new initiatives and what was the thinking behind them, and what kind of gaps in the ecosystem did you see that they're kind of designed to fill?
Yeah, sure. So the accelerator program is on the first vertical, that we're targeting. So agribusiness innovation, mostly business to business economic model, and B2G too, to government. Earliest stage possible. Ideal stage is the best stage for us. Might not be usual for investors, but this is where we want to be in. We even have a directory of ideas, innovation that we would like to see that we're sharing with people. So even if they do not yet have begun to think on things, we'll be able to, a little bit like YC, Y Combinator is doing often now, with suggestions of what they want to see. So we've done a similar work with, I think, 500 ideas that we see that can create value in this agribusiness sectors opportunities. And so it's in 3 phases. The first one in online, fully online with our first curriculum. No investment at that stage. Then we select the best 10 that went through the incubation phase, and we do a first investment of 30,000, 30. And after that, we select the best 4, where we do an investment of 300,000 US, all that. And the goal for us is really to invest and be there as co-founders. That's why we like the really earlier stage, not just an investor that is passive and asking for reports every quarter and a board meeting. We're really hands-on with the companies we're investing in, providing the expertise that is needed through the pool of experts that we've built over the years. So really as co-founders, so the innovators can focus on the genius part. And the idea for us is really that that could be researchers, scientists, people building app, finance people building the new rails to fund these value chains, etc. They don't have to go, as we did as entrepreneurs, to all the things around navigating institutions, funding, distribution, communication, legals, etc. All these things, we're working with them, working on how to structure the intellectual property, because what we're mostly looking for is solutions, trade secrets that we can then package, provide them to local partners. I'm always taking the example of, if we find someone doing the best processing for mango jelly, you have mangoes all over these places that we're talking about that are rotting every year because you have too many of them at the same time. Are we able to structure the process, structure the hardware, structure the software that might be needed, all that, the distribution channels, the opportunities, the branding. So if it's someone from Trinidad, I can say next month we have someone from Jamaica or from Ghana or from Kenya, Nigeria, that are able to do the same thing without the need to rebuild from scratch. So that's the kind of thing we're looking for. And the fund is a 15 million, 15 fund that we're currently finalizing with different partners. And on Building the Caribbean, the initiative on this community building part, it's something that, yes, we're launching, but I will say relaunching, because the first event that we've done, in-person events, and it was online too, for Building the Caribbean was already 3 years ago in San Francisco. We did that at Draper University when I was there for the Draper Heroes program. And so we gathered people from the Caribbean diaspora in the Silicon Valley, plus people interested by the region for a lot of different reasons. And we deeply think that the Caribbean, as West Africa, as a part of the world, have, on top of the challenges that are creating opportunities, have the talents, have the resources, have the capital, have everything, in fact, that is needed to solve these issues and create that generational wealth we were talking about. And one of the important things that we do, and that is kind of missing, even if you have new initiatives. Recently, there was an initiative launched called Future Caribbean, for example. You have the official launch after when we begin to work on that of the Carib Equity that we're part of. But Building the Caribbean for us is a platform where people that might not be innovators, that might be someone from the diaspora working in, an IT firm in London, in Paris, or in New York, or someone from the diaspora working in a distribution network in Ghana, or students in a college or whatever in the Caribbean or in Latin America, can go there, be involved, see what's going on, see where he or she can be involved in whatever way. That could be operations, that could be, I'm able to connect you to someone in Costa Rica, I'm able to have access to a buyer in Nigeria that would be interested by that product. So we're strengthening and structuring that ecosystem for a specific tool, and then go to the next phases and facilitate, catalyze the connections, first around the vertical that we're addressing around, agri, food, everything that can be done from green resources. We're talking about energy, for example. We're talking about construction materials. We're talking about cosmetics. For us, agri is not just what we eat. It's not just food. It's a lot of different things that we can do from the green resources that we have, and create that network so opportunities are easier to access, and when the right people are connected, are easier to execute.
100%. And, that's one of the things that, especially as someone that's part of the diaspora as well, it's really important that I think there's a really important role for us to kind of play in terms of helping to support these initiatives and make sure that, if you are part of the diaspora and you're listening to this episode, do reach out, get connected, and see how you can support. One of the things that you're pretty well known for, and I would say that you're really good at, is your ability to kind of build those bridges and collaborate, which we know sometimes is not the easiest in our region. And it's kind of some of those kind of soft skills, about how do you turn those connections and relationships into actual results, work, as opposed to just talking about stuff.
Let's talk more doing.
More, yes, exactly.
This is part of the baseline that we have.
Exactly. How important do you think it is for would be innovation leaders or entrepreneurs from the Caribbean and the Africa and so on to develop these skills, and how would you suggest that they can cultivate them?
I think if you're working at the ecosystem level, and mostly in the innovation ecosystems, it's something where if you want to be able to build these great opportunities and to be involved in them, you must be the go-to people in a way or another. And being the go-to people is being able to provide access to opportunities, even if you're not involved in these opportunities. I think the day before we're recording this, I got an email from a partner that we're working with asking me if we can connect them to someone. That's one of the reasons why we did the platform to Building the Caribbean. But if we can connect them to someone, to two people in St. Lucia on a specific project related to finance, etc., they reach out to me because they know that I have a network. They know that they work with me on different things and they can trust me. And they know that it will be fair because I will not try to do some weird stuff. And for me, the reputation as ecosystem builders most importantly in the innovation ecosystem, is something key. And it's one of the biggest parts of the value we're building. It's how people are coming back to us because they know that we will do the right thing, we'll connect with the right people, and we'll find a way for them to create value too. And I know in the same way when I'm creating value for someone else, when it will be my turn to ask how they can connect me to someone, etc., these are people that will answer. Even if I have not find solutions for them, because you cannot find solutions for them every time, and it's not your daily job, I will say, even if it's important. People knowing that you're trying and you have created some opportunities for them in a way or another will always go back to you to work with you, etc. So this bridge that we need to do is important. And another example on why it's critical and at what level it's not really done by most of us at least in the region, but even in West Africa, in the US. I'm based in Guadeloupe in the French Caribbean. I've been building my ecosystem in the English-speaking Caribbean from recent years. It's not something for decades, but I've been able to connect people living, for example, in Barbados that didn't know each other, did the same thing in Jamaica, did the same thing in Ghana, and because I took that time to reach out to understand what people are doing and how we can do this bridge and create value for them. And in the same way I did these connections, people know that they can get to me for some of the opportunities, etc. So critical for me to master that. And I think how to improve that is to practice why I have this network that I built in the English-speaking Caribbean, in the US, in Latin America, in the diaspora, in Africa, etc. In the past 3 years, I think I reached out individually to thousands of people. Some answered, some others didn't. And I did, I think, more than meetings with more than 400, 500 people in the past 3 years that I didn't know before. So now it's part of the value that I have, because I know that for this specific thing, this specific project, I can reach out to these people that might be the one connecting me to the right people. So it's critical. It takes a lot of time. But once you've been able to build it, it's a huge value that no AI will compete for.
So, we could have maybe started with this, but our audience is global, many in what we would call global north and so on. And having worked in the space on this side of the world for quite some time, the Caribbean and sometimes some places in Africa are not generally the first that come to mind when you're thinking of innovation ecosystems. How do you kind of see these regions leading in terms of innovation over the next few years? Or maybe where do you see that they are already leading?
I think, there are some pretty basic facts. Today, what we call Global North is still leading in some areas. But when you look at where the population is, where the growth is, where today the innovation is already, when you look at what's going on in Asia, in India, in China, in Japan, I think the earth of innovation, if I have to be a little bit out in the world, is not anymore in the global north. The financial power might still be in the global north, and even that, I think it should be measured to know the reality of it. But all the opportunities, not all, but most of the opportunities and the things that need to be addressed and solved are in the rest of the world. So for me, it's obvious that these ecosystems and the solutions will come from the people living the situations. You cannot build to solve something that you don't know. That's why I think that we're seeing this kind of disconnection today between innovations in the global north and innovation in the global south. And again, I think it's linked to what I was explaining on the how we impact the daily life of people. Today, innovation in the global north are not really impacting the daily life of people. It's more about improving our industries that are already there, are working, improving how the top 500 companies in the US, in Europe, can make potentially even more benefits, not benefit, more profit from what they're doing. But we're not talking about the billions of people around the world that are trying to see how they can get access to water, how they can leverage what they have, how they can face climate issues that are raising more and more. So the big value, I think, is coming more from that part of the world. These innovations will come more and more from that part of the world. So that's where we should focus on. And again, from what you were saying about the audience, that is a global audience that might be listening, etc. What I think is interesting when you're linked to these territories and you're part of what's called the global diaspora, etc., is that you can do the bridge between both. You know the global north, you know the global south, you know what's interesting in both sides, if I can say so, create value to build this infrastructure, etc. And you're in a space where you can talk to each other. And getting back to the Caribbean, I think it's one of the big strategic advantages that we have in the Caribbean, because a lot of the Caribbean culture is still rooted in Africa, for example. And Africa is the current big opportunity on everything, I think, around economic growth, population growth, etc. So we have this link, even if some people are not aware of it, but we have this kind of shared culture, even if they are different, but they are more similar than others. And at the same time, because of the history of our territories, our countries, our communities, we have the same kind of connection with the Western world and the global north, and with Europe and with the US, etc. So we're able to navigate between both, which might not be the case for someone based in the US or in Paris that might not understand the reality of the Caribbean or Africa, and which might not be the case from someone based in Africa or in the Caribbean that might not understand the reality of people in Europe or in the US. That's why, again, getting back to the Caribbean, I think it's a kind of special place, but everyone from a specific place will say the same thing. But we have this, I think our history wasn't the easy one. It created some bad things, it created some good things, but I think we're in a space where we can take advantage of that to build something different that will create value for a lot of people, and not just people in the Caribbean. So we should really be focused on these local ecosystems, because that's where the next innovation will come from, the solutions that will be global solutions used by more people, they will come from there. And from people that might not be from this part of the world, if they want to stay, I think, up to date with what's going on and what will be the future, they need to be connected to what's going on there in the proper way to be connected there. And hopefully, if people can listen to that, we need to get out of this extractive way. AI today, in the way the West is building it, is extractive. In the way Asia is building it, is totally different, because the mindset are different. And so we need to find the proper channel, the proper path to do that, and build things that are meaningful and that create financial opportunities too, because we're still in a capitalistic world, in most of the world.
I was reading about your story that you shared the other day on your profile, and you faced your own kind of challenges in your journey. Any times when people are trying to move forward, they have to sometimes face certain structures or realities that sometimes makes progress kind of feel difficult, or like they're going up against a wall. What advice would you give to other people working in the space, or even those that are just trying to make a change in their communities and so on? What is a piece of advice that you would give them that you wish someone had told you at the beginning of your journey?
I think it's part of the journey first. If you're not hitting those walls. It might be because you're not pushing enough, or you're not tackling something, I would say, really meaningful, or other situation, you're starting from a better position than others, because that's a reality too. You might not hit those walls for the same things if you're starting from another position. But I think most of people trying to do meaningful stuff are hitting them. And then the question for me was be able to know what are my priorities. Because when you're hitting those walls, you need to prioritize, you need to make some choices. And for me at the time, for example, is what to say, okay, do I want to keep going that way and potentially not be there another day? Or do I prioritize to be there for my family? You know, my wife, got a son, another one in the making, I would say. And what happens when you prioritize, because you only have 24-hour a day, and a big part of it must not be working. It must be being able to be ready for the next day and sleeping enough and eating the proper way and doing exercise and being there for the people around you. It is what should be done today, what can wait for tomorrow, and what cannot be done at all because you cannot do everything. And be okay with that. Because if you're getting in a way or saying, okay, I cannot, and you're not okay with that, then you're getting in burnout. I went there. You're getting a lot of different difficulties that might be big issue then further down the line. And a nudge there too, I think it got me more to what is the meaning of what I'm doing, what is the purpose. And for the one that are a little bit, I would say, spiritual, what is the spirituality behind what you're doing? What sent you there? And when you are able to answer questions, it's getting easier, to execute, to implement, and ask less questions, and just implement. And step back to see, I had to leave that, for example. We're always coming with a kind of hubris, saying we're the one able to change it because we have done stuff in other places, etc. There were generations before us that tried to solve the same challenges, that did not find a way for probably the same reasons as why we potentially are hitting these walls. And so it means that we need to find other strategies with the strength that we have today, and not just be there, okay, I'm better. And to be honest, stepping back, I think myself and with other partners at the time of our journey, we were kind of in that position to say, okay, we're educated, we had some first successes, blah, blah, blah. And so just because of that, we'd be able to have better results. And at the end of the day, it didn't happen like that. So again, the humility to say, I cannot do everything. What can I do? Why I'm doing it? And what are my priorities? And then if we're able to answer to these, I would say not 4 questions, but to state facts around these 4 things, then it's way easier. The weight is lighter. And so you can execute in a better way and do what you can do each day at a time.
That was some great advice. Thank you so much again for joining. I really enjoyed this conversation. But before we go, I would really like to just kind of know, can you tell us a little bit about what's next for you and your team, and maybe how can our listeners learn more about and support your work?
Next, as I said, we're in the phase where we are building the community with Building the Caribbean. Officially, we have done already a big part of it, but buildingthecaribbean.com, it's where most of the things are happening. Or directly through my LinkedIn. We launched the accelerator. So this is on accelerator.eog.group, where people can apply, etc. And we're still, building that network, building that pool of partners, funders, etc., to get to the next phase. And we're in a big, I will say, funnel of execution for I would say the next year, at least, with all the things that we need to do. But most of it is, again, strengthening the network of allies, of partners all over the world, and see how we can create opportunities. So We're discussing with governments, we're discussing with private partners, with funders, with universities, schools, everything that can help others go faster. And so that's why, for example, we're doing this consultancy for the investors training. Everything that can the ecosystem go faster is helping us go faster. So feel free to reach out, connect Sébastien Célestine on my LinkedIn, maybe in the contact, I think, around the podcast, there will be a few links, email or whatever. And even through Gabi, your host today, feel free to connect through Gabi, and we'll be happy to see what we can do together in the coming weeks, months, years to build and work on building the Caribbean, building Africa. And as we said earlier, with less talking and more doing.
Amen on that. Thank you, sir. Yes, definitely we'll have the links in there, as you say. Thank you so much again, Sébastien, for joining us. It's been a pleasure. Well, that's a wrap on this episode of the Innovation Brief. If you've enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. It helps other innovation leaders and curious minds discover the show. I'm Gabby Hernandez. Please join us next time for another inspiring conversation. Thanks.